The Wolves are out, and according to a growing number of Caitlin Clark fans, they've been waiting for this moment all season because all it took was one bad shooting game, one rough performance, one opportunity, and suddenly critics came flying out from every direction. Not questions, not analysis, attacks, the kind of articles and commentary that make you wonder if people were waiting for Caitlin Clark to struggle just so they could finally say, "See, we told you so." And honestly, that's why this conversation is exploding right now, because for months, Clark has been carrying expectations that almost no athlete could realistically satisfy. But yeah, of the league, face of women's basketball, record ratings, record attendance, constant media attention, and somehow, after everything she's already accomplished, one rough game suddenly became an excuse for people to start questioning everything. Her attitude, her behavior, her leadership, the way she talks to referees, all of it suddenly became fair game, and fans immediately noticed the timing, because when Clark is hitting logo threes, selling out arenas, and driving headlines, a lot of these same voices stay quiet. But the second she struggles, the criticism arrives at full speed. That's why Fever fans are furious. Not because Clark played perfectly, she didn't. Not because she's above criticism, nobody is. But because many supporters believe there's a difference between criticism and a coordinated pile-on. And right now, they think the pile-on has officially started. Meanwhile, the timing couldn't be worse for Indiana. The Fever are already dealing with inconsistency, questions about coaching, questions about injuries, questions about expectations, and now Caitlin Clark finds herself battling something completely different. Media narrative that seems to be changing in real time. The question is no longer whether Clark can handle pressure. The question is whether people have been waiting for her to fail all along. And honestly, this story isn't really about one bad game. That's what makes it interesting. Because if Caitlin Clark had one rough shooting night and people simply pointed it out, nobody would care. That's sports. Every superstar has bad games. Every superstar gets criticized. That comes with the territory. But fans believe something different is happening here. They think the criticism suddenly became personal. Not in basketball personal, because once the conversation moved away from missed shots, people started talking about Clark herself, her personality, her reactions, her emotions, her behavior toward officials. And that's when supporters started pushing back, because one of the strangest things about Caitlin Clark's career so far is how quickly normal basketball moments become character debates. Missed shot becomes a leadership discussion. A disagreement with a referee becomes an attitude discussion. A frustrated reaction becomes a personality discussion, and fans are starting to notice that pattern, especially when other stars around sports have done similar things for years without creating the same level of outrage. That's why emotions got so intense. After these articles and commentaries started circulating, people weren't arguing about statistics anymore. They were arguing about standards, because supporters looked at the criticism and asked a simple question: would this be treated the same way if it was somebody else? And honestly, that's where this debate becomes impossible to separate from the bigger Caitlin Clark conversation, because she isn't being viewed like a normal player anymore. Every game becomes a statement. Every performance becomes a headline. Every mistake becomes a national discussion. That level of attention changes everything. And once people believe different standards are being applied, the conversation gets a lot louder very quickly. And honestly, this is where the situation starts getting complicated, because there are really two separate conversations happening at the same time. The first one is completely fair. Caitlin Clark has not played perfect basketball this season. She's had turnovers. She's had shooting slumps. She's had games where expectations were higher than the results. That's normal. That's sports. Nobody serious is arguing otherwise. But then there's the second conversation, and that's the one fans keep reacting to, because some of the criticism isn't about performance anymore. It's about perception. The idea that Clark is somehow becoming a problem, that her competitiveness is suddenly a negative, that her frustration with officials is unique, that her emotions are somehow different from what sports fans have celebrated from stars for decades. That's where supporters draw the line, because if we're being honest, passionate athletes argue with referees all the time. NBA stars do it. NFL players do it. Baseball players have been doing it forever. Nobody likes it when it happens to their team, but it's hardly new. Yet when Clark does it, the conversation seems to explode into something much bigger. And that's why many Fever fans believe this isn't really about officiating or sportsmanship or even basketball. They think some people are simply tired of hearing about Caitlin Clark, tired of the attention, tired of the headlines, tired of the spotlight, following her everywhere she goes. And when somebody becomes that visible, critics naturally start looking for flaws. The problem is that once people start searching for flaws, every moment becomes evidence, every complaint becomes proof, every mistake becomes confirmation. And that's exactly what supporters think they're watching right now. Not objective. Analysis, a search for reasons to knock Clark down a level, which is why one rough shooting game suddenly turned into a much bigger story than anyone expected. And honestly, there's another reason Fever fans are getting defensive, right? Now, timing. Because the criticism didn't really explode when Caitlin Clark was breaking attendance. Records, it didn't explode when she was driving television. Ratings, it didn't explode when arenas across the league were selling extra. Tickets, because she was coming to town. But the second she hit a rough stretch, suddenly everybody had something to say. That's what supporters keep pointing to, not the criticism itself, the timing of it. Because when someone becomes the face of a sport, people eventually split into two groups: the people who want to see them succeed, and the people waiting for proof that they were overrated. That happens to every superstar. LeBron dealt with it, Tiger Woods dealt with it, Tom Brady dealt with it. The bigger the star becomes, the bigger the reaction when they stumble. And Caitlin Clark has reached that level now, whether people like it or not, because she's no longer being evaluated like a second year or third year player. She's being evaluated like a symbol for the league, a symbol for women's basketball, a symbol for growth, a symbol for attention. That's a completely different standard. And honestly, that standard can become impossible, because if she plays well, people say she's supposed to. If she struggles, people act like it's proof of something bigger. That's not a normal environment for any athlete, especially one still trying to develop her game, which is why so many Fever fans feel like the conversation has become unfair, not just because Clark should be protected from criticism, but because they believe some critics are no longer judging the basketball. They're judging what Caitlin Clark represents. And once a player reaches that point, every game stops being just a game. Every performance becomes a debate. Every mistake becomes a headline. And every rough night becomes an opportunity for people to push a narrative they've been waiting to tell all along. But honestly, this might be the most important part of the entire discussion, because whether people agree with the criticism or not, the WNBA has a Caitlin Clark problem. Not because of Clark, because nobody seems to know how to talk about her anymore. Think about it. If she has a great game, people say the coverage is excessive. If she has a bad game, people say she's overrated. If fans defend her, they're accused of being obsessed. If critics attack her, they're accused of having an agenda. Everybody is reacting to everybody else's reaction. And somewhere in the middle, the actual basketball gets lost. That's what makes this whole situation so strange, because Clark is still one of the most exciting players in the sport. She's still drawing attention, still filling arenas, still creating conversations that most leagues would love to have. Yet somehow the discussion keeps shifting away from basketball and toward culture war arguments. That should concern the league, because attention is valuable, but constant division isn't. And honestly, some fans are starting to believe the media plays a role in that. Not all media, but certain voices, because controversy generates clicks, conflict generates engagement, and Caitlin Clark remains the easiest name in women's basketball to build a headline around. Whether the story is positive or negative, that reality isn't changing anytime soon, which means Clark is probably going to keep facing this exact situation. One bad game, one controversial moment, one emotional reaction, and suddenly the spotlight becomes 10 times brighter. The question is whether people are judging her fairly, or whether they're judging her differently because of everything she represents. And right now, that debate is only getting louder. And honestly, that's why this story probably isn't going away anytime soon, because at its core, this was never really about one bad shooting night. It was about what happened afterward, the reaction, the coverage, the rush to turn a rough performance into something much bigger. And the reality is simple. Caitlin Clark is going to have bad games. Every superstar does. She's going to miss shots, turn the ball over, get frustrated, argue with officials. That comes with being a competitor. The real question is whether those moments get treated the same way they would for everybody else. Because right now, a lot of Fever fans don't believe they do. They think Clark lives under a completely different microscope. A microscope. That gets even harsher the moment she struggles, and whether that perception is right or wrong, It's becoming a bigger part of the conversation every week. That's why emotions keep boiling over, not because people think Clark is perfect, because they think the standard keeps changing. Meanwhile, the Fever still have bigger problems to solve: winning games, finding consistency, getting healthy, figuring out their identity. Those things matter far more than media narratives. But narratives still shape perception, and right now, the perception battle around Caitlin Clark is becoming almost as intense as the basketball itself. Which brings us back to the biggest question. Are critics simply evaluating a superstar the way all superstars get evaluated? Or were some people just waiting for the first opportunity to come after the biggest name in the league? That's the debate fans are having right now, and it doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Caitlin Clark is being criticized fairly? Or do you think certain media voices are holding her to a completely different standard? And another question, is this normal superstar treatment? Or has the conversation around Clark become bigger than basketball itself? Drop your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because we've got more Caitlin Clark and WNBA coverage coming, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.